But its budget has come under criticism by the new cost-cutter-in-chief Elon Musk, with funding frozen and staff laid off or placed on leave. Because according to the White House, this humanitarian agency is part of the woke agenda.
After more than 60 years in action, USAID, the agency in charge of helping out other countries, was suddenly shut down by the Trump administration. Why? Well, Elon Musk didn't hold back. He straight up accused them of being corrupt and wasting money. And the words he used were so harsh, people started wondering what on earth he and his team had discovered inside USAID's building in Washington. What made him that angry? And who else knows what really went down? Let's take a closer look at what Elon and his crew might have stumbled across at the heart of USAID. To fully understand the fiery claims Elon Musk has been making, it's important to take a step back and look at the history behind USAID. Let's go all the way back to 1961, when one U.S. president had a bold vision that would not only aim to improve America, but also help lift up other nations around the world. That president was none other than John F. Kennedy. By this time, over a decade had passed since World War II, and America was already solidifying its place as a dominant global power. With the future looking increasingly bright, JFK wanted the U.S. to do more than just thrive on its own. His vision was to help other nations rise too, in the hopes that global peace and stability would follow. To bring this ambitious vision to life, JFK recognized that America needed a fresh, innovative approach, a new agency that could provide the support, resources, and education that struggling nations needed. That's when USAID was born. Officially launched on November 3, 1961, thanks to the Foreign Assistance Act that JFK signed into law on that very morning, USAID quickly gained a reputation for saving lives and making a positive impact in countries that were in desperate need of help. However, there was a key principle behind the agency's creation that JFK emphasized while signing the act into law. USAID was designed to operate independently from the government. The idea was to ensure that the agency could focus solely on its mission of aiding foreign nations without getting caught up in the political intricacies of U.S. domestic affairs. The hope was that even if there was a change in leadership back home, the agency could continue to carry out its important work without interruption. For many people, this idea seemed like a step in the right direction, and there was widespread hope for the potential good that USAID could do around the world. But as noble as this vision was, it didn't take long for cracks to appear in the system. Even though USAID was set up to function independently, it still needed funding from the government to operate. Donations and charitable partnerships simply weren't enough to sustain the agency's work. So every year, USAID had to go back to the U.S. government asking for more money. And with that came the inevitable reality. The agency had to play by the rules of U.S. foreign policy, which often changed based on shifting political winds. In order to keep the funds flowing, USAID had to consistently demonstrate to Congress and the public that it was using the money wisely and that it wasn't involved in shady dealings. But despite all the transparency measures and checks and balances, the agency was often mired in financial scandals, unreliable partners, and a long history of questionable spending. Over time, these issues started to raise serious doubts about the agency's credibility and effectiveness. It began to seem like USAID's noble intentions might not align with its actual practices. These growing concerns left many people questioning whether USAID was truly the generous, world-saving organization it claimed to be, or if it was just another carefully crafted cover-up for a secretive agenda that few truly understood. And that's where things start to get really interesting. One of the most vocal critics of USAID's operations in recent years is former U.S. Representative Ron Paul. Though he's long since retired from politics, Ron has remained a keen observer of USAID's activities, especially the individuals running the agency. This brings us to Elon Musk. Yes, the very same tech mogul who revolutionized space travel with SpaceX and pioneered electric vehicles with Tesla. In 2024, Elon took on a new role as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, a department created by then-President Donald Trump. This new role gave him the responsibility of keeping a close watch on how public funds, especially those allocated to agencies like USAID, were being spent. And according to Ron Paul, it didn't take long before Elon stumbled upon something that raised more than a few eyebrows. When Elon asked USAID for access to their internal systems, just to get a clear look at their latest projects and where the cash was going, they flat out refused. That didn't sit right with him. So, determined to get answers, Elon went to the president, and the two of them agreed to freeze USAID's activities for at least 90 days while they dug deeper. During that time, most of the staff were sent on leave, and over $40 billion in funding was put on hold. Ron Paul also mentioned that Elon had come across some pretty strange documents hidden within USAID's Washington HQ. According to him, these files could potentially reveal shady activities and financial misdeeds that had been going on quietly behind closed doors. But before we dive deeper into that rabbit hole, it's important to remember this. Many people who've worked with USAID or received help from them have nothing but good things to say. The agency has played a big role in improving healthcare, education, and disaster response in many struggling parts of the world. A lot of lives have been touched by their work, and that's not something to just brush aside. That said, Elon insists there's a darker side to the story that most people haven't heard about. While he's never denied the agency has done a lot of good, he's also never kept quiet about the bad stuff he claims to have seen up close. On February 2nd, he made it official, publicly calling USAID a corrupt organization. He hasn't shown his evidence just yet, but Ron Paul and several other sources say it's because Elon uncovered proof of corruption right inside their Washington headquarters. Later that same day, Elon went live on X, formerly Twitter, to confirm that he had indeed spoken with the president about everything. And after discussing the details, the decision was made to push for major government reform. That, according to him, is what democracy should look like. While the White House didn't release a statement right away, Elon posted on X just over an hour later, letting everyone know they were already moving forward with the changes. In that post, Elon pointed out what he believes to be the agency's biggest issue, how they've been spending money lately. Take this year, for example. They've budgeted over $40 billion to help people affected by natural disasters around the world. That sounds like a good thing, right? Well, Elon wasn't convinced. He looked at the numbers and felt like the amount of money USAID was spending didn't quite line up with the actual results. Last year, they reportedly spent $43 billion, and the year before that, it was over $70 billion. Impressive on paper, but Elon says the outcomes don't reflect those kinds of figures, which could mean a huge chunk of that cash wasn't handled properly. And that's not even the full story. There have been past reports of USAID's funds going missing or being misused, sometimes ending up in the hands of corrupt politicians under their watch. According to Elon, this isn't just a case of bad budgeting. It's a full-blown constitutional crisis. By now, it's pretty widely known that USAID has been working with a bunch of NGOs, some of which have faced serious criticism in the past. These groups have been accused of either being way too expensive to run or simply not delivering the kind of help they promised. Some contracts were reportedly bloated beyond reason, while others seemed to go to politically connected organizations that had little or nothing to do with charity work. That means a lot of the money was likely going to groups that didn't even need it, while the people who actually did were being left out. The reason no one noticed this sooner? USAID tends to keep their financial details tightly under wraps. They don't exactly shout from the rooftops about where the money goes. This became especially clear when Elon Musk's team at the Department of Government Efficiency tried to dig into their spending records on February 1st. That's when two high-ranking security officials from USAID tried to block them. Their excuse? Elon and his team didn't have the right clearance to access the system. Not one to let things slide, Elon called them out publicly the very next day. And that's when things started to shift. Both officials were placed on administrative leave, and with no one left to stop them, Elon's team got straight to work. Within hours, they had full access to the agency's systems, and took control of everything. That included gaining entry to sensitive information, like private data tied to millions of students and families. In short, Elon's team had the power to lock out employees and go through emails and internal files tied to how money was being used, both in the US and overseas. While this move was reportedly done to crack down on corruption and boost transparency, a lot of people felt like Elon might have crossed a serious line. So how exactly did he pull this off? According to 5 USAID officials who spoke to The Guardian just hours after the showdown, Elon's crew may have tapped into something called SCIFs, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facilities. These are top-level secure tools used for managing classified information. The issue? Elon apparently got access to these tools without the proper authorization. The officials believe this because of the way Elon had called them out, with serious confidence and insider-level detail. To them, it seemed the only way he could have known so much so quickly was if he accessed super private files he wasn't supposed to. The worry was that he may have done so without being fully briefed on the reasons behind certain classified operations. In response, one of Elon's own advisors posted on X, formerly Twitter, stating that no private files were accessed illegally and that everything they did had full legal clearance, including access to private intelligence reports. The AP later backed this up in a report, confirming that Elon's team had officially gained control of USAID's systems. What happened next? USAID continued to suspend employees, especially those who worked in the agency's legislative departments. Some of these staff members said they woke up one morning and suddenly couldn't log into their emails. Over 100 of them were dismissed within days. And things got so tense, the ones who still had jobs were reportedly showing up to work each day, waiting for their own pink slip to land on their desk. As of now, President Trump has placed all of USAID's global operations on pause, part of his broader America First approach. The main idea? Put the needs of the US ahead of spending money on other countries. While the goal might sound practical in theory, the impact has been pretty brutal worldwide. A lot of struggling nations depended heavily on USAID's support. Some of the hardest hit include field hospitals and refugee camps in Thailand, programs for clearing landmines in war-torn regions, and health services that provide medication for people suffering from deadly diseases like HIV. These programs have now been put on hold, and the only ones still running are the ones that involve saving lives. Even with such high stakes, it seems like all the programs could eventually be scrapped. Back in 2023, USAID handed out over $70 billion to support operations in other countries, and with additional funding from the government, the agency contributed to more than 40% of all UN-tracked charities last year. Despite all this, the issues in these regions remain unresolved, as though nothing had changed. With this in mind, Elon Musk hopes that his department can streamline costs at USAID and figure out how much funding they truly need for their operations. Based on the amount they come up with, the president will decide whether to let the agency continue at a lower cost, place it under full control of the State Department, or just shut it down completely. In live sessions on X, Elon expressed hope that the agency wouldn't be scrapped entirely. To make sure that doesn't happen, he placed Special Marine Corps veteran J.D. Vance in charge of figuring out the future of USAID. But things only got worse from there. On February 3rd, after just one day of close investigation by Elon's team, the tech billionaire became a lot less hopeful. He started to believe that USAID might be beyond repair. The words he used to describe the agency's operations were so intense and harsh that they couldn't even be mentioned here. They were so shocking that people began to wonder what exactly Elon and his team discovered in that building. Whatever it was so bad that Matt Hobson, USAID's new chief of staff, hired by the Trump administration, immediately resigned after finding out. He was just one of 8 officials hired by Trump, and rumors are flying that he might not be the last, especially with more revelations expected in the coming weeks. While Elon Musk has yet to release the specifics of what his team uncovered, it seems someone else has decided to spill the beans. That someone is none other than former U.S. Representative Ron Paul. a man who has been keeping a close eye on USAID's activities for over a decade. So buckle up, because the answers he shared were pretty surprising. Before we dive into what Ron had to say, keep in mind that what we're about to reveal comes from Ron's perspective, and it's based on what Elon allegedly discovered behind closed doors. According to Ron, Elon's reason for calling out USAID goes far beyond poor spending habits or mismanaged resources. He believes that USAID should never have existed in the first place, at least not according to the Constitution, since it takes taxpayer money from Americans and gives it to other nations without proper legal authority. Ron argues that the U.S. government was designed to help its own citizens first and foremost before sending money overseas. While President Kennedy created the agency to assist struggling nations, what Elon's team uncovered suggests that USAID has exceeded its original purpose and is, in fact, doing more harm than good in the long run. The agency is allegedly collecting billions of dollars from hardworking American taxpayers to help other countries when there are serious issues at home that should come first. According to Ron, USAID should be funded by public donations and private charities, just like it was intended to be when it was created. One major example uncovered by Elon's team took place back in 2019 and again in 2023 when USAID sent millions of dollars to Afghanistan to help their struggling economy. The latest instance came when the U.S. was still dealing with the aftermath of high inflation, and gas prices were only just starting to come down after the 2022 surge. Many people were still finding it tough to make ends meet, which made the situation even more painful. The worst part? A huge chunk of the money sent to Afghanistan to boost its economy ended up being lost to corruption. In the end, the money didn't even reach the people it was intended to help. And that wasn't even the worst part. According to Ron Paul, what Elon and his team discovered in the USAID building implied that the agency didn't even try to make sure the money was spent correctly. Ron argues there were several ways USAID could have ensured better spending. For one, they could have worked with local organizations and NGOs with direct communication to the public to make sure the help reached those who really needed it. They could have also required reports showing how the money was being spent properly, ensuring that funds weren't being misused. Instead, USAID simply sent money straight to the government, which wasn't a great move. They could have sent resources that were more useful, things rich people didn't need, but would have greatly helped the wider population. Even if they had to send cash, there were ways to do it responsibly, like using blockchain technology and biometric verification to ensure the funds reach the right people, without any interference from corrupt officials. This situation is just one example out of many donations to other countries, which added up to over $100 billion spent from 2021 up to now. And while billions were going overseas, many Americans were still struggling with local issues, like crumbling roads, expensive health care, and public schools that were falling apart. It became clear from the records Elon reviewed that USAID didn't need to ask for such large amounts of money for their operations, but they did it year after year without fully disclosing how they spent it. Meanwhile, back in the US, young people were drowning in student debt, people's unpaid bills were stacking up, and the price of groceries was becoming unaffordable. These facts made Elon very upset, and he voiced his frustration on X, sparking a huge online conversation. But that was just the beginning. According to Ron, while USAID leaders have always believed their work improved America's relations with other countries, the undisclosed records examined by Elon's team suggested a very different story. A quick look at recent history shows that in some cases, countries receiving U.S. aid later turned against the U.S. or used the aid for harmful purposes. For example, there have been reports of violence in developing countries carried out using tools and resources provided by USAID. Because of this, both Elon and Ron believe that USAID's operations aren't just unfair to the hardworking Americans who have no choice but to fund them. They've also contributed to the very problems they were meant to solve. One such example is what happened in Egypt back in 2011 during the Arab Spring. Despite billions of dollars in U.S. aid to the country over the past 5 years, the people protested against the high cost of living and their poor living conditions, showing how the money wasn't having the intended effect. Elon believes the Arab Spring should never have happened in the first place. Later, it was discovered that certain corrupt leaders were using USAID's funds to strengthen their military instead of improving the roads, schools, and hospitals that had been in dire need for years. When the protests escalated and things took a tragic turn, it became clear that USAID's funding had only made the situation worse by supporting leaders who made life harder for the very people they were supposed to help. This was just one of the many issues found in the records Elon's team reviewed. If we rewind further to 2001, Afghanistan was facing some very tough times. Despite years of support and funding from USAID aimed at helping the country stabilize, things took a turn for the worse once the US allowed them to handle things independently. As a result, much of the aid provided by USAID ended up in the hands of the same hostile group that the US had spent years trying to remove. This implied that all the sacrifices made to promote peace ultimately only made things worse, leaving Afghanistan with even more problems. Fast forward to 2010, when Haiti was struck by one of the most devastating earthquakes in its history. With homes, schools, and hospitals destroyed, the country needed substantial help to rebuild. USAID, as expected, stepped in, sending over $1 billion to aid in the recovery efforts. However, just like in other instances, much of this money found its way into the pockets of wealthy elites, rather than being used to rebuild the infrastructure needed by the impoverished. Instead of funding local businesses, USAID funneled money to large foreign companies, which worsened Haiti's economic struggles. To this day, Haiti still grapples with extreme poverty, showing how USAID's billion-dollar involvement did little to help the people who needed it most. Even more troubling were the accusations that USAID's efforts helped rebel groups in countries like Venezuela, making it seem as though the US was getting involved in domestic disputes that had nothing to do with them. As a result, corrupt leaders doubled down on their harmful actions, creating more problems for their people. With all of this in mind, Ron believes that the reason Elon is so determined to end USAID is because the agency tried to exert control over how other countries manage their governments. Instead of helping, USAID ends up taking sides, supporting corrupt leaders, and inadvertently fueling conflicts. But the most shocking issue found by Elon's team? Media manipulation. According to Ron, one of the key things Elon uncovered on February 2nd was evidence of USAID manipulating the media. Ron went as far as to claim that USAID's recent efforts to help other countries were nothing more than a media facade, masking their true intentions. He argues that USAID has been working behind the scenes to influence media outlets in countries they support. If any major news outlet dared to spread information that painted USAID in a negative light, the agency would pull their support from the country, essentially silencing dissent. This media control has been so effective that independent news sources in countries still receiving support from USAID are virtually non-existent. According to Elon, the situation has become so bad that everything the public knows about the conflict in Ukraine is essentially what USAID wants them to know. Ron calls this a closed propaganda loop, a system designed to suppress free thought and only allow the world to see what the agency approves. This chilling level of control over information is just one of the many reasons Elon and Ron believe it's time to dismantle USAID altogether. Elon recently explained his findings in a video posted on X, where he revealed in detail what his officials uncovered about USAID. According to him, even Congress has unknowingly fallen victim to the agency's influence, as much of the information they rely on comes from mainstream reporters assigned to these countries. If you thought that was the end of the story, brace yourself. Elon's next claim is bound to blow your mind. On February 3rd, Elon Musk accused USAID of unknowingly contributing to research efforts that ended up doing more harm than good. He explained that while the agency had tried to support scientific research and prepare countries for future health emergencies, a simple misdirection of funds resulted in the money falling into the wrong hands. As a result, harmful germs became more resistant to medicine, causing a worldwide outbreak. Although the media quickly debunked this claim due to a lack of concrete evidence, many still remain concerned, especially with Elon keeping many details under wraps. Ron Paul believes that if this accusation were true, USAID should have been far more careful with where their money went and who was in charge of the research. As things stand, though, it seems the agency is innocent of this claim, and Ron argues that this could have been avoided if USAID had been more transparent and accountable from the start. As for Elon, he believes that before the Trump administration, many people in the agency were more focused on manipulating the politics of other nations than actually providing assistance. He pointed to 2003, when USAID directly supported rebels in Georgia who fought to establish a government that was friendlier to the U.S. While many saw this as a victory for freedom and democracy at the time, Elon views it as an example of USAID using taxpayer money to change foreign leadership. It wasn't until 5 years later, in 2008, that the full repercussions of this involvement were felt. Georgia found itself in serious conflict with neighboring Russia, and instead of allowing the people to decide their fate, USAID deepened its involvement, exacerbating the problems that ultimately led to a clash with Russia later that year. Ukraine offers another example of USAID's meddling. Since 2014, USAID has sent billions to Ukraine to support democracy, combat corruption, and strengthen the economy. However, Ron Paul's analysis of records reviewed by Elon's officials shows that much of the money was spent on supporting political parties that aligned more with American interests. This funding fueled protests and led to a new government that favored the U.S. over one that had closer ties to Russia. This worsening relationship with Russia has contributed to the ongoing conflict, resulting in suffering for the very people USAID aimed to assist. Ron argues that the situation between Ukraine and Russia would likely be in a much better place if the agency hadn't gotten involved in matters that didn't concern them. Elon shares this sentiment, believing that both Georgia and Ukraine have the ability to find peace without USAID's interference. When a foreign government knows the U.S. is spending billions to support opposition groups, they're bound to react harshly, which only worsens the situation for ordinary people who don't care about political games. The worst part, according to Elon and Ron, is that these well-intentioned but misguided efforts were funded by American taxpayers, meaning millions of struggling citizens are unknowingly paying for programs that prevent other nations from determining their own future. At the moment, it seems there's little hope for USAID's future. The latest reports only cast the agency in a negative light, and President Trump appears to want to merge it with the U.S. Department of State so it can continue functioning under direct supervision. Elon, however, still insists that the agency should be eliminated entirely. With a 90-day suspension in place, we'll have to wait and see what the future holds for USAID. So, what do you think? Will USAID cease to exist in the coming months, as Elon hopes? Or will it continue under the Department of State, as the President prefers? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the next video on your screen for more content you'll love.